More than half of all companies globally are family-owned or operated. Family businesses contribute 70% of the world's GDP and account for 65% of jobs. Their voices are important. Their stories must be told. Brought to you by the award-winning publication, Tharawat magazine. This is the Family Business Voice with your host, Ramya El-Agami.
Monkey Business Catering, a family's non-linear road to success. Amy Thompson and her family are no strangers to adversity. For almost a century, the Thompson family life revolved around the dairy farm. Like many small businesses in the agrarian sector, however, there was only so much the family could do in the face of amalgamation, deregulation, and international competition. In 2001, the Thompsons were forced to sell their farm, but remained resolute, driven to define success on their own terms. We had the opportunity to speak with Amy Thompson about perseverance, flexibility, and her family's nonlinear journey to entrepreneurial success. Enjoy this episode with Amy. I'd love to just hear it from you in your own words, Amy, if you don't mind. Can you tell me a little bit more about how your family actually ended up in the food business? Can we call it food business catering? Is that right?
You can definitely call it a food business.
Great. So tell us more about that, Amy.
Sure. So obviously we're an Australian business, and my family originally were farmers. So we've always been in the food sector. The dairy farm was dairy, so it was all mainly milk production. And that was in the family for nearly 100 years. And then what happened over 10 years ago now in Australia is the dairy industry got deregulated. So the price of milk just collapsed completely, and my family went, we can't make a good living out of this anymore, so what other options are available? So that from that point, when I was quite young, my parents decided to sell up the farm, and then it was moved to a different town, which we're in Toowoomba, which has got roughly 160,000 people in population. So it's the largest non-capital city in Australia. I know, not impressive when you talk about Europe and millions in the city, but for us, it's a decent population level.
Don't worry, I'm from Switzerland. Like the biggest city we have is like a million, and they're counting all the agglomeration around it. So don't worry, I get it. Go ahead.
And I love towns that size because even if you don't know someone, you know of someone who knows them. So it's a beautiful kind of culture. So back to your question, which I think I've wandered from.
There's two things I really admire about this. You have a legacy of about 100 years, right? You have that farm, which obviously there's a huge amount of emotional attachment from the family side, right? Like that's not an easy thing to let go. Then something that is out of your control happens, basically, you get your industry gets deregulated. So I'm really interested in understanding psychologically how your family sort of decided to move on from that. And secondly, why catering? So why establish Monkey Business Catering, and how did that involve you as a next generation as well? When your parents sort of had to get out of a business, get out of a sort of a legacy business that pretty much is part of your DNA, I would say, by this time, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about that, Amy?
Absolutely. So I would say my family are survivors and entrepreneurs. So you adapt with the circumstances. So when it's outside of your control, you just take the elements that you've been left with or you've been given, and you work it to your best advantage, because your other options are just to sit down and collapse. And that's not an option. So psychologically, I would say it was incredibly hard. So hard, because you're leaving behind legacy and bits of your family's past. But we chose to weave it into something new, a new story, and a new adventure. It wasn't a straight path from dairy farming to catering. So for my parents, they've always had small businesses. So straight out of farming, they brought in irrigation business. And then there was a franchise, which was Michelle's Patisserie, which is coffee and cake and done through a franchise system. So people deliver things that are already made and then you on-sell it. So for me, there's probably about a 6-year period between when the dairy farm was sold to when I was off. I I studied at Blue Mountains International Hotel School, so I've got a degree in business, majoring in hotel management, and then I had enough time to grow up and do a few other jobs in different places. And then it was just that point for my family when, with the franchise, franchises are a hard gig. They're very difficult to make money and be profitable when you're trying to deal with a franchise system and set products and set prices and everything else that's tightly controlled. So for my parents, it was just a conversation we had where I went, well, I'm ready for another adventure. And my parents went, well, why don't you come back for a while? You can help us wrap up what's happening with the catering, and then we'll see where we're at that point. So during that time, there was a lot of people who kept going, well, you're a food business. Can you do some catering for us? We just, we need something quite specific. And unfortunately, within the catering model, we couldn't service those requests because of the inflexibility of what they do and how they do it. So it was just one of those dinner table conversations where you go, what are our options? What can we do with this? And can we really live with ourselves if we let an opportunity like this go past, because it has possibilities? And that was the moment where I think my mum and I had half a business plan written out very roughly over a dinner table conversation. And then it was probably another 6 months of hard work setting up everything that needs to be set up behind the scenes for a business to work while we were doing a soft trial through the franchise and through the products that they had available. And then we launched using secondhand equipment and everything that we could get our hands on. And a garage was converted into a kitchen so that we could do things properly. And, food licenses from the council happened. And then it was all systems go from that moment. So it's strange how something very simple a long time ago can continue to have a domino effect. So it's kind of farming deregulations, other business opportunities, and then you just keep seizing opportunities till you end up at a point that you didn't even know was a possibility.
It's a lovely story, and yet a story that you can hear must have been quite tumultuous, also emotionally at certain times for you guys. Like entrepreneurship at its best is a very difficult choice of career choice to make, and I think that when you have no other choice because it's your vocation, it's probably even tougher because you're just obsessed with finding that idea that'll allow you to go to that next level. So fascinating to hear your story here, but tell us a little bit more about what was different about when you guys then started Monkey Business Catering, because I think you said so there were businesses before. How did you know? Was there a moment in time where you looked at your mom or you looked at your parents and were like, okay, guys, this is different. This is going to work because it feels different. Did it remind you of how it used to feel with the farm, or how did you identify that this was going to be the next sort of family business that you feel like you guys were going to stay with?
I would say that the first 2 years were rocky. So statistically in Australia, they say that 8 out of 10 small businesses fail. And so for the first 2 years, I was doing the whole, will this work? Won't this work? We've got the elements, but will it come together? Because there's factors that you just can't control when it comes to business. And that's always a very difficult process. But it was probably that moment when we realised that finally we had more flexibility to adapt as things change, rather than having all of those rules and regulations enforced upon us. And that's when we knew it was different. So there's a lot of things that we do, like using recyclable packaging, or the composting that we do, or simply the flexibility that we have with staffing and with people, which you're not able to do when it's a huge business. And quite often those things take a long time to implement. So for us, because we're small and dynamic, one of us can wake up tomorrow morning and say, I've got this brilliant idea. And if we're all pulling together, we can turn that idea around very quickly. So before I knew it, I think my sister-in-law, who isn't deeply involved in the business, she's more someone who comes and goes as needed, but she said, we've brought chickens. And I went, okay, that's interesting. And she went, I need chicken scraps. And I went, I have some for you. You can have it every week, as many times as you want every week. And that's that's worked so beautifully for us. And then there's been other people who with composting and that kind of thing. So we feel like we've got more control over the business. We feel like we can adapt more fully as things change. And then we feel like we can actually be better citizens because we can address some of the things that are close to our heart, like living sustainably, that we couldn't with other dynamics.
Amy, tell us how you guys are working together today. So how many family members are you? You just mentioned your sister-in-law who comes in, makes requests and then leaves again sometimes. But like, what about the rest of the family? So like, who's involved today and who's doing what in day-to-day business?
Sure. So I'm the lead. So I'm the one on the ground every day in the business, working on it full time. My parents are half investors, so they do a lot behind the scenes. So particularly with advice because they've run so many businesses. My dad is incredible. You think ex-farmer, basically can fix anything with a Victoria X pocket knife, a bit of gaffer tape. So here's our, when we need to design something for markets or if something breaks, or his skill set is just so appreciated. Then I've got two beautiful sister-in-laws, one with the chickens and the composting, who's quite happy to use and recycle the stuff we have. And the other sister-in-law is involved in our social media and marketing. So that's what she does in her day job. So she does that for us too as a private client. Then at the moment, I also have one of my cousins who works with us to get things prepped and out and delivered. And then the other main player is my grandmother, who is over 80 years old. And every now and then when we get short-staffed, she'll decide that, yes, she can come in and wash dishes for 2 hours because she wants some coffee money. Which is just one of my favourite things.
You had to throw the grandmother in there. That's just brilliant. That's just good branding, isn't it?
She's wonderful.
I love it.
She's just so wonderful.
Yeah, so your brothers are not involved in the business right now in the day-to-day?
So one of my brothers was incredibly supportive when we set up the business. So he can consult with the websites and that kind of thing because that's where his career is. And the other brother, it's just not an interest at all, except his wife forces him to pick up the chicken scraps.
That's the husband of the chicken scraps wife. That's great. So,
Exactly.
But because I'm just asking you because I think it's of course like it's quite an interesting evolution, right? Like not only did your family business sort of get out of a trade or association with a certain industry, but usually farming is obviously like something that very much goes from father to son. Whereas now, like, not only did you guys get out of the typical business, but now also it's like actually the daughter who's taken over the reins and sort of is running the next family business. So I find this absolutely fascinating. So all these changes happening. Can I ask you, do you think that if the farm had continued, you would have taken such an active role with the family, or do you think it would have fallen to your brothers more?
I think with agriculture, it's a very physical world, and my skill set and my inclinations were never towards that. And I think that's why the catering's been so successful, because on the farm, my dad, just as a side note, is a Nuffield scholar. So that meant that he did his scholarship and went overseas, did his 6 months visiting various farms. But then the reciprocal arrangement is that you host farmers, and often it's a busload of 50 farmers on your property. So I grew up in this atmosphere where you might have 5 notice and a busload of 50 people will turn up. Or if you have a Christmas party because you're in the middle of nowhere, you'll invite 150 people. So I grew up in this atmosphere of you make your community, and you make it through inviting people, feeding them, and often they'd be staying as well in tents or whatever it is because the drive's a long way. So while we were on the farm, the things that I enjoyed and gravitated towards were things inside the home. Mm-hmm. So my inclinations are just a bit more traditional. With that dynamic, my skills from a very young age were you can feed people, you can look after people, you can turn food out with what you've got in the cupboards and what's available and for the number of people that it's for, whether it's 4 or 40. And my brothers, because they were external and doing a lot of the labour involved and the production of the raw food rather than actual turning the raw food into things that are edible, it wouldn't have it just hasn't been the merge of skill sets for them. Whereas for me, it's just been this beautiful flow.
It's been a good transition into something new. That's wonderful to witness, though, to be able to maintain at least a familial sense of collaboration. That's wonderful to see. Because I think, like, this is what gets lost very often, unfortunately, right? This is what we worry about as family businesses, is that when the original business ceases, the opportunity of working with family doesn't have to or automatically cease. But I think that a lot of families attach the notion of working together to that traditional business or to one specific industry, and don't think that it's transferable maybe to other activities. But a little bit more about Monkey Business Catering as well, because it is a fascinating. I really love the website. Like, it's so funny and it's nice and cheeky. I mean, we have to ask you, like, why the monkey though, Amy? Like, why say monkey business, right? Like, it's hilarious, but like, what made you guys choose the name?
My family has a weird sense of humor. Which is such a blessing, and at the same time it plays out in ways you wouldn't expect. So I would say about 20 years ago, my mother decided she'd get a christening present for a baby that had recently been born into the family. And so she went out and she got this stuffed monkey that's really cute, super, super cute, and she brought it home. And it just disappeared from the gift bag because obviously she hadn't stapled it shut properly, and it kept turning up in odd places. So you'd open the pantry door and it would be hanging out in the pantry, or you'd climb into bed at night and it would be there underneath your sheets.
That's just creepy.
Well, in an adorable kind of creepy way. And then when people were going off on trips, the monkey would end up in your bag, and you'd open up your bag on the other side of the world and you'd go, oh, hitchhiker, and now I have to carry this thing around for 4 months. And it just kind of morphed and merged and ended up being a long-running gag in the family. So when we needed a name, it was just one of those things where, how do you choose a name and why do you choose a name? For us, it was a excuse to show our personality, and at the same time, I think we'd already had kind of an inkling or a prophecy, if you want, that a lot of our catering was going to be business catering. So our clients are about 90% businesses or corporates or non-profits here in town. And so the pun I love just as much as the monkey itself.
I love it. But like, I'm asking because the temptation, of course, in saying like, okay, we're doing another family-owned concern, we're doing another family-managed thing, would have probably been for many to use the family name, right? Like, so I find it really interesting that you guys opted for an insider joke as opposed to like, putting the name on the door. Were you ever tempted for a moment to say like, let's call it like, no, not at all. Interesting.
Not for 1 second. And I think what you were talking about before, about how families often follow this traditional linear line of this is what we're doing, that's why a lot of them don't seem to prosper as much, because I think with family, every person has a different set of talents. And so if you're going to do business with family, you need to recognise that each individual has a specific talent set. And if you're going to do it successfully, you leverage against the talents that you've got available to you. So for us, one of the joys about Monkey Business Catering is that you never know. In 15 years' time, you might see that there's a Monkey Business hotels or a monkey business something else, because we're not wanting to lock ourselves into one play plan. We want it to be able to be adapted to the talents that arise up in the family and the people who are interested. And if my cousin, who is about 3 months away from finishing her nursing degree, decides she's going to get a job nursing, I am going to be there at her graduation cheering, and that is just as exciting as what she's currently doing for us.
Well, it's that flexibility, isn't it, that makes you survive. And I think it's what you said in the beginning as well, like that agility. And what you just said right now as well, sadly, is true. A lot of family businesses get lost in the identification, get stuck in identification with a certain industry. But however, today it's probably more true than ever before, although there's some debate going on about whether we're being overly dramatic about this time and era these days, like, the technological disruption and stuff like that. So yeah, we might be exaggerating a little bit, like have a bit of a victim syndrome here, but like, to be fair, it is true. There is exponential technological change, which is a fact. So what we've just mentioned, for many family businesses, it's actually not even it's not even a discussion anymore. Like their industry is being severely disrupted. Their business models are definitely becoming obsolete. Many of them are closing their doors already, and are not able of moving on to the next level, such as you have. The question that I have for you is like, the role of technology. Can you tell me a little bit more about your family's relationship with technology, and like, how you now are sort of like working this all to your advantage, which I know you are, but like, can you just explain to us how you're doing that?
So this may go into a bit of a controversial topic, but I know within our business in food services that 30% of my costs, or just slightly below that, is going to be allocated towards the raw food cost ingredient. I also know that there's going to be another 25 to 30% allocated immediately towards labour. So these are my two biggest costs that are involved. So our relationship with technology has always been to look at it and see what way that it can interact positively with those two main costs and how we can make it work to our advantage. And we're a big believer in employing people and supporting people and making sure that that's a long-term commitment. But there's ways that you can do it that's smart. And so technology is just another tool in our toolkit on how to make our business sustainable long term, so that we don't just employ people now, but we can do it in 5 years. We can do it in 10 years because we're still profitable and sustainable. So for us, the first thing that I'm really passionate about is the suppliers and systems that support our business and make it work, that we partner with ones that are engaged at looking at how they're also going to better themselves in the future and how they're addressing change and the disruption and technology. So a great one is that we chose a accounting system, because accounting systems are one of those bedrocks that your businesses just exist on. We chose one that wasn't a traditional format, that was a younger company that's still doing all of its product development and is a bit more agile, because you never quite know what's going to develop. But a huge thing that's come through in the last 2 years has been integrating accounting systems with the credit card payment systems, so that all interacts really smoothly and automates a segment of your business, which you're nodding. So you've seen those come through, and instant payment with a click from the invoice. And that's beautiful. But if we hadn't partnered with a younger software company that's doing all of this product development and integration, that implementation for us of a streamlined credit card payment system with automatic receipts being shot through wouldn't have even been a possibility. And that's one of the key things that is a competitive advantage for us in the marketplace we're playing with. I think we're the only catering company in Toowoomba, which I find shocking, that's already made that leap of this is how we're going to ease this payment process for our clients.
You know what I like about this conversation, Amy, is like, you're emphasizing indirectly, probably, I'm not sure if your family does this very consciously or whether it's just like a result of what you said before, like your survival skills that have outlasted many generations. But it's interesting how when I listen to you, it's a lot about who you surround yourself with, right? Like it's a lot about how open you are towards those kind of relationships that get you to the next level. So the instance of saying that we have a technology partner that helped us actually develop a competitive advantage over our competition, again, something that a lot of family businesses can learn from, because I think after a certain amount of generations, we tend to believe that we should be doing it on our own. Everything should be coming from the family business, as opposed to understanding that today there's so much complexity, such rapid change, you inevitably are confronted with the need for partners. So the future of Monkey Business Catering, I loved when you said before, I'd love to say I checked into Monkey Business Hotel. I'm going to be very honest with you. If you open that, I'm coming over, and I want to stay at the Monkey Business Hotel, because that just sounds too good. It has to be on my CV somewhere. So, but is that actually...
You can come and see the beautiful Toowoomba.
Yes, I'd love to. But is that actually something that is already concretely happening in your heads, as a family, where you're okay, so we're building a brand that will eventually branch out into different things? Are you thinking about it?
we want the dynamic to continue, for us to be able to seize opportunities as they come, because that's where sustainability happens. And we won't sacrifice the quality of what we're currently doing, or the time that's involved, and our relationships with our clients, because our current catering is really built on ongoing relationships with corporate clients. And once again, relationships. But opportunities come your way. And if you're an entrepreneur, if you're seeing a need in the market, and I'm not saying that you should create a business just because you think it's a good idea. I'm saying that there should first be a need, and then you should address that need. And that's what makes things successfully, because you're addressing something rather than forcing it to happen. And long term, the dynamic will just keep shifting and we'll keep changing with it. And I can already see opportunities within Toowoomba and the wider area, because this is a regional hub, for that to develop quite naturally. And so we'll seize hold of opportunities as they come.
Well, I love that you can find world-class entrepreneurship even in the remotest areas of the world. You're so far away from us, and yet we all have so much in common in the way we see things. Wonderful speaking to you, Amy, about your family business and your family's legacy. We're really deeply honored to have you in our magazine.
Thank you so much. I've really appreciated it.
Thank you for listening to The Family Business Voice. Subscribe to our channels now on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, or Spotify to be notified of our weekly episodes.